a carrier partner of ours during peak season, who's typically rather reliable. They just got massively overwhelmed, and we had to shut them off for a few weeks in December. We turned them back on once we started retesting them and make sure the performance was strong. And so you have to be able to move pretty quickly with that.
After the podcast, I want you to spill the tea. I want to know who's screwing up. Talk about them behind their backs. Casey, such a treat. Welcome to the Orita Podcast. For those who don't know me, I'm Aaron Schwartz, one of the founders of Orita. I've known Casey for a very, very long time. Orita builds AI customer segments for a bunch of Klaviyo brands. Casey does not build AI customer segments, and we're not talking about email marketing today. We actually get to talk about the fun world of logistics and building a brand for a great 3PL.
We actually do build that, but we build it for our customers. We don't offer that as a service.
All right, fair enough. Well,
yes.
We can talk about this separately. Casey, thank you for joining. I've known you for a very long time, always deeply admired your work and really enjoyed every time we've gotten to chat, whether it was about other tech startups or running a brand, and obviously about ShipBob and the logistics ecosystem. I would love to start with you giving a proper introduction yourself. What's your background? I knew you from a couple companies ago, so please, I think understanding how you got here would be really interesting for the audience.
Sure. I'll give the short version. So yes, Casey Armstrong, the CMO over here at ShipBob's. So as you'd guess, I am fortunate to oversee the marketing side, but also partnerships and this other business unit we have called Powered By, which is actually, I think, something very unique that ShipBob brings to the table as well. Prior to ShipBob, I spent some time over at BigCommerce. And then before BigCommerce, I helped run a brand called Watchmaster. We were a luxury watch brand over in Europe. And that's kind of how Aaron and I first crossed paths, from when we were both slinging watches.
I'd love for you to go into the Watchmaster journey a little bit and a little bit into your mentality. Did you always expect to be a CMO in marketing, or let's actually start with that. And then I'll ask more how running a brand has actually informed kind of your work at ShipBob serving brands. But yeah.
Yeah. So when I got into technology, it was mostly on the B2B side, B2B SaaS side, which I personally prefer and think my skill set lends itself better to than the consumer play. And so that was what I typically done. As we all know from a handful of, fortunate meetings and incidents, or however you want to frame it, I came across the founders of Watchmaster. They were actually based in Berlin. And so actually at the time I only had one kid. So my wife and my oldest and I, we moved to Berlin for a little bit, and I helped run a few things over at Watchmaster. And so, yeah, we were luxury watch, mostly D2C brand. We'd actually sell B2B as well. It was essentially like VAT arbitrage. Honestly, we'd buy in the South and sell in the North. And there's, it's a pretty interesting business, but it did lay a lot of and I'd done some stuff on the consumer side before, but it did help lay a lot of the framework or groundwork for why I was so interested in joining ShipBob, because there's a lot of things we did really well. We were growing like crazy. We did a really strong job on customer acquisition, user experience. But really especially so our average order value was 6,000 euros. And so, the importance of inventory management, shipping and fulfillment when you're sending those are things we did not necessarily do that well. But it's so paramount, especially when the COGS and the average order values are so insanely high. And so that's where, when I started talking to the ShipBob team, and I was like, wow, if we could bring this, very, call it Amazon for D2C brands, or this is before Shopify got in the space. Basically, if we could bring the Shopify for fulfillment to all of these brands, it's just such a massive opportunity here. And it's not a nice to have, it's a must have. Either you're shipping yourself, somebody's shipping for you, or you don't have a business. And so, yeah, that was really the groundwork for, why I was so excited to join the ShipBob team.
I think I remember, I was sitting next to you and Mike Averto at Shopify Unite in 2019 when they announced fulfillment. And I looked and I was looking at the logos or the icons. And I was like, is this are these your locations? And I remember it wasn't. So I was,
it looked like one of our pitch decks, but
yeah, it was
not.
What a journey that must have been. All right, let's linger on Watchmaster for a second and then bring that into the ShipBob side. So you had this very high priced luxury product. Were the issues that the packaging wasn't luxurious and you were doing FedEx Ground instead of obviously the equivalent from Berlin? Or what were the actual issues on the fulfillment side or on the logistics side that you felt there?
It was mostly, well, one, even though, because we were uh, we were doing decent volume, especially for our average order value, but like we weren't pushing out like crazy volume that you'll see from some of these other brands. But even there was like, are we even shipping out in time? Like, we didn't even have SLAs on like, okay, the order comes in. When are we going to pick, pack, and ship this out by? What are like the standards from the carrier selection process? How are we handling signature on delivery? Who are the carriers that we're even utilizing across different countries? Because we weren't just selling in Germany, we were selling across essentially all of the EU and the UK. And so the expectations from those customers can vary greatly. And so that was really the driver. We actually, it was pretty interesting too. We actually would do pickup in store from our office, which we also did not have like the security and the groundwork for that. You'd get some like semi-scary German guy coming in with like buying 2 watches for like 25,000 euros on the spot, and then all of a sudden he starts to negotiate with you like in some like, dingy conference room. But anyways, that's a different story.
Yeah, that sounds well, you made it, so congrats. I'm glad you did. If,
Yeah, we
um,
survived.
yeah, so when you joined ShipBob,
Mhm.
and there obviously fulfillment is a very big deal, and there are a lot of competitors. What was it about ShipBob in particular at the beginning that drew you in? And I'd love for you to kind of talk about like how the business has changed. What I want to do is not get into a pitch about ShipBob, obviously, but I want to kind of tease out what are the things that like make a great consumer experience. So when brands are thinking about how to do fulfillment, how to set expectations, how to
Yeah.
even like design the site, they can think about that whole journey. So yeah, so like, why did you join? What felt different, and like, how has the business been evolving?
Uh, I mean, why I joined is also why I'm still there. And again, it sounds semi cliche, but it's really the people. So you meet the founders in particular and spend some time with them and really see like the passion that they bring to it, and just the even from like the way that they ask questions. Like for example, our CEO, who I still report to today, from the interview process of how he would like basically get down to the root of like every single question he'd ask, he still does to this day. And how that lends itself, and then just really like the customer obsession part of it, of trying to understand like what was my involvement from like the customer lens. And I think that's what's put us in a position to still be in a good spot and growing rather well today, is just like that customer obsession. And so, our goal is to do as many things right as possible, but that's it's impossible to bat 100 or bat 1,000. And so, but it's really like using the customer inputs on how we get better, and also to really like drive like innovation in the future as well.
And how much of the like changes that are happening are like the customer inputs are like, hey, we need to change the digital product versus we need to increase the number of shipping options versus we need to like get on to the site and help them set expectations for their customers? Is it all the above, or like where do you guys kind of start and stop at this point?
Yeah, so I'd say I'm probably forgetting a few things. As I was joking with you before, I was fortunate to be in Europe for a little bit, so I got back late last night, so my brain is still like waking up. It doesn't know what time it is. I'd say, let's say you're thinking of like the different inputs, and so of course there's like the data side, which I think is really driven by the customers, and then there's the customers' anecdotal feedback, and so I'd say that's like the vast majority. And then of course we're trying to hire smart people in the space that have done some things before, and so that's like a big input as well, which is like what do they intuitively believe, or what have they seen work elsewhere. And then of course you have to monitor like the macro, so like what's happening from like a global perspective, especially over the last like 5 or 6 years. It's been like pretty insane. And then of course you're keeping some eye on the competition as well. I'd say that's like by far like the smallest sliver. And but I'd say the vast majority, it's listening to the customers. And there's been countless examples that have, again, I'm not here to just pitch ShipBob, but I think it's good for just people like running their business to think through. It was really we started, now we do our big customer event called Fulfilled every year. Before that, we just did these like smaller product advisory councils where we'd fly in 5 to 10 of our larger customers and get their feedback. And so that really spawned really 2 big things for us. One of them being um, going global. And so when we did, it was also 2019, after that Shopify Unite event that you mentioned. that, was really getting customer feedback. And, long story short, we went through this big like whiteboarding exercise, and they kept having to like whittle down things that they wanted. We got to this like top 10 list, and like number one on the list was actually a global fulfillment center, in particular Canada. And so the way we decided to go about it also kind of changed our approach as well. But that was really like the catalyst for us like pulling forward the global roadmap. Everything was like everything on the top 10 was like on our it's just on our product roadmap already, except for we actually were not planning on necessarily going global at that point. And so that really helped pull that forward. And then the way that we now split out our WMS, our warehouse management system, and offer that as a standalone solution for brands as well, and actually now 3PLs, that was really customer driven as well.
When you think about the WMS side, is it like when should a brand be doing their own fulfillment? When should they be using you guys and and when should they be thinking about using you guys across multiple facilities? Maybe a vague question, but like, how do you think about the like distinctions
Yeah,
between?
it's probably the question I get the most. And again, the honest and like lame answer is it depends. But what I really anchored on is like, once you start seeing that I'll start with most companies or brands in our space, from the founders and then their first few hires, like fulfillment and logistics is not going to be like their differentiator. It maybe for some, but it's like probably a vast majority. Most of these people are customer obsessed, product driven, understand sales and marketing exceptionally well. It's not necessarily like supply chain and logistics. And so if that's like your specialty and like, what your like true 10x like superpower is, like, then maybe you can do it on your own for a lot longer or maybe forever. But I think for when brands start to see that, they start to get glimpses of the time that they're spending on like the supply chain and fulfillment part is eating into what's going to help them win. Like that's when you got to start looking. You got to start looking then. I think similar to how brands are, able to go into, retail and the more omni-channel approach earlier in the journey. I think brands are starting to look, to outsource fulfillment much earlier in their journey as well.
And then what was the decision for you guys about opening up the WMS to 3PLs? Like that is enabling others is it about better product feedback? Is it just meet the customers where they're at? Like, how did you guys make that call?
Yeah, well, that was actually like a more recent thing. It started with the brands. And so we had customers that were like, hey, for a multitude of reasons, they wanted to, do their own fulfillment, but they wanted an extremely strong warehouse management system, and they wanted to be able to leverage ShipBob Logistics, which is essentially our transportation arm, because we'll actually do the pickups from their facilities and inject it into our network as well. And so they get a bunch of wins there. And so the first customer that did it, she actually was based just north of me up in LA. She was moving her business over to Austin, Texas, and wanted to open up a coffee shop, and thought, okay, well, my team members can, they'll have a little bit of spare time. They can pick and pack and ship our orders today. And like, that's fine. But like, what's the software you're going to use to do it? How are you going to manage the transportation arm? And she's just, I don't know. I guess I'll figure that out. We go, what if we could give you our WMS and do the pickup for you? And of course, still from the integrations to what you have across all the different channels, the way that you manage your inventory coming in, manage your inventory going out. And so I know that she was pretty excited about that. And so that was, a huge win for her. And again, was really the catalyst for us splitting off the WMS. And then another big win from that too is what a lot of brands will do is maybe for, again, different reasons. They want to have their own node, but they also want to leverage the ShipBob network. And so you're still using the ShipBob dashboard, let's call it. You're still using the same WMS that we use in our facilities. But let's say you're now in Austin, Texas, but you also want to get, faster and less expensive shipping on the coast, or you want to start shipping in region globally. You can do what we call like our hybrid option. And so you can use our WMS, but you can also use the entire ShipBob network. And it's still, everything flows into the same software. You're not using anything third party.
You mentioned Powered By. Can you walk through what Powered By is? And then I'll have I want to double click a little bit on all this, but just to like.
Yeah, Powered By is really the culmination of the investment in our technology at the API layer, investment of our technology at the merchant application layer, the investment technology at the WMS layer, and then everything sitting on top of our global infrastructure. and then how we can bring that, let's say, to platforms, just like what Stripe does for Shopify on the payment side, we can do that for fulfillment. And so the best example is probably that I can at least talk about publicly is TikTok. And so TikTok came to us in, what was that, 21, late 2021. And they wanted to launch Amazon level logistics like yesterday and not spend insane amounts of money. And so, we worked really closely with them and helped them launch TikTok Shop in the US and offer Fulfilled by TikTok. So we powered Fulfilled by TikTok for a very long time.
That's very cool. Casey, I think one of the things that I've always found remarkable when I talk to you is like, I talked to you and you're the CMO, and yes, you own partnerships, but you are extraordinarily deep in the actual product, right? You're not just like kind of surface level and telling a story. Like you actually deeply understand it. I'm curious, like, how do you do that? I see like photos on LinkedIn of you at a warehouse every once in a while, but like, what is your methodology to get close to customers? And how do you think about that also for your team and your org?
Appreciate that, but that's a good question. I haven't thought about that. I think we're fortunate where we actually do have this like, huge technology solution, but it also has this like, there's the physical buildings and like the people actually doing like the work in the buildings, and so our customers often are trying to visit us in the facilities. And I think, just over indexing on like getting to know the customers better and meeting them in person. And then as a byproduct, being able to like sell or showcase, what the product is. Like, how else are you going to market there? I mean, I guess maybe shortcut on the marketing side is it's really like customer voice. And so it's just talking to them all the time because they're the ones that can, I think, better verbalize and give you the snippets of like how you should even market or sell the product versus like, was just sitting in a room with your colleagues and trying to sound all smart. It's like, just talk to your customers. Like they know they have all the answers for the most part.
Yeah, I love it. By the way, I remember visiting one of your facilities. I think it was a different trip in 2019 in Chicago.
IRC.
Might have been a big commerce event or something back
That
then.
was IRC. So we'll
IRC, right? You're right. You're right.
for that event.
So I gotta get an updated tour at some point, and then I'll start a brand. And then I'll
evolved a little bit.
Help me understand very quickly, like the spirit of you own marketing, but you also own partnerships. Like, is partnerships kind of like all tech partnerships? It's like go to market partnerships. Is it kind of across the board? And like, how do those two intersect?
It's really everything except for the carrier partners, which that sits under transportation. And I guess like the honest answer is we didn't really have it much when I joined, and I was pitching the upside of it and many reasons why I was bullish on it as a standalone channel, but also how it complements marketing and sales. And so fortunately got to, jump on that very early. I mean, you remember George and Carly pounding the pavement with
I was going to mention George and John and Carly.
and others. So, the fun pre-COVID stuff when all of us were on planes all the time.
Yeah.
Which I guess we now are again. But yeah, that was really the driver. And I think just I think what people like the two of us really enjoy about the e-commerce space is how interconnected all of it is. I mean, look at your business. It's driven on close partnerships with, very strategic partners, and then how your solutions together add like a lot of incremental value to these brands, and same with us as well. Like nobody can win in the space by themselves.
Yeah. I love the attitude. And very, very much aligned. Okay. Before we get into like AI and how it's changing your work and also like the day in the life of your customers, one of the other things that's kind of remarkable to me about ShipBob is just the breadth of brands you serve. Right? So it's like true SMBs are obviously like scaled, and now you're powering them maybe through a different facility or their own facility. How do you think about like telling the story of a total offering where it's like, it really is meeting each customer where they're at? Like what is the overall narrative of ShipBob? And then I actually just kind of want to tease out from you, like, how have you gotten there? Like, what's your journey been to help people who are trying to figure out positioning and think about stuff? Yeah. So how do you guys serve everybody is kind of maybe question one.
Yeah. It's always a work in progress. I think where we view ourselves is if we're not your first fulfillment partner, we want to be your last, which is not something we could say for a long time because when I joined, we could really service, the true SMB bucket, and sometimes maybe not all of the in SMB. And now we can really service, we work with, billion-dollar plus publicly traded brands down to people who are kind of just getting started. From a positioning standpoint, I mean, that does sometimes make it a bit harder. And so I think you have to think of like who's like the sweet spot, who's like the true ideal customer profile or ICP. And then how do you tell this, tell the story of those brands is more aspirational story, because that way you can hopefully land more brands like them, and then a lot of the brands that want to be like them.
All right. Talk to me about the current state. Last year, if you remember, there were tariffs and there's a lot going on in the world, and,
There were.
there's distributed inventory and yada, yada, yada. How have customer expectations changed, if at all, in the last year or two? And let me just start with that. Like, how do you think the customer expectation, their set of what they want, has been changing?
I mean, yeah, that was such a massive shock to the system. We had a lot of our customers trying to understand which way is up. I think we've done a good job of, internally we think of how do we create this, reliable, resilient infrastructure for our customers. And so when these macro events do come, that they can kind of be shielded from it all. And so, of course, we can't have tariffs go away, but I think there's a lot of the stuff we were able to bring to the table, such as, a multi-node network in the US, in-region fulfillment across the globe, which can improve the customer experience and reduce like the total like shipping cost to hopefully alleviate some of like the tariff burden. And so that's what we had from the start. But then it's like, okay, well then how can we leverage our team and technology and connections in the industry to open up even more? So we launched our foreign trade zone or FTZ facilities as well, which again doesn't make it so you don't have to pay tariffs, but you can defer tariffs and at times eliminate some of the tariffs. And so from a cash flow perspective, it can be a game changer for these brands. So that way, instead of seeing $100,000, $1,000,000, $10 million check on day one, the second your inventory lands in the US, you defer it until it enters US commerce, which can be once it leaves the FTZ facility and goes into like your retail stores, or even when you ship direct to consumer. And so you can use your customer sales to pay for your tariffs.
That's a very cool product and experience. When did you guys open that up?
We opened that up early last year.
And is it something that you would recommend every brand, again, whether ShipBob or elsewhere, but like, should everybody be thinking about an FTZ, or is it like once you hit a certain scale, like the numbers start making sense?
I think it depends on what the tariff rates are for your products. And so now, especially with like the elimination of de minimis, and I know that there's a lot going on between what tariffs will and won't stick and what's happening with de minimis, but in general, I guess the easy way I'd view it is it was kind of like the new Section 321, which is how a lot of the brands were shipping out of Mexico and Canada and sometimes China to avoid the tariffs because of de minimis. Anything that was under $800 in value, you could essentially ship into the US tax-free. And so I think, again, depending on the volume, because it does require a little bit more paperwork and work. But again, if you're deferring tariffs quite considerably, it's worth it, especially brands that are in like the apparel space, usually electronics. That's where there's often a lot of cost savings. But we work with a pretty large company in the beauty space. And what they'll do is, because they manufacture a lot of their products in the US, so they don't have to handle that. But like the tins or the containers that they ship it in, those will come in from China. And so they might order a year's worth in advance. They can have those sit in our facility. And then let's just say once a quarter, they'll ship 25% of their inventory in bulk to their co-man. And so then they don't have to pay that's when they pay the duties and taxes once it leaves our FTZ and goes to their co-man.
Do you think, maybe a leading question, but actually, like, I haven't been on this side of the house in a while, so I just have assumptions. Has the like focus on cash flow management really evolved in the last couple of years? Is this something that's like actually at the tip of everybody's tongue, or are brands back to being like, no, we want to grow? Like, are people thinking about the P&L as they should be at this point?
100%. I mean, you've been watching the craziness in the ecosystem for obviously a really long time. When COVID hit, people were just growing like gangbusters every way possible.
So much fun.
Sell. Yeah. And again, and that's where I think Shopify entering the space and then COVID, they
Mhm.
just put such a spotlight on like why fulfillment's important. And so it really accelerated like the education process. But it's really okay, how can we get a partner like a fulfillment partner that can actually like ship stuff out timely and at the speed we need. But then of course then there was like the post-COVID hangover. And so there was all this competition, and so brands were really trying to figure out how to navigate that. And also that's when a lot of like the iOS changes and Apple versus Meta came in. And so those ads kind of plummeted for a while. And so brands were like, okay, well, what are other channels I can look at? And there have just been so many of these like macro changes. Then there's tariffs, there's the de minimis changes. Now there's obviously, hopefully it's short lived, but there's what's going on in the Middle East, and now gas prices are skyrocketing, and so brands are like, okay, am I gonna have to pay fuel surcharges? What does that look like? And so there's always just these kind of new curveballs that continue to come out.
If I'm a brand and I'm working with you guys, is part of your role to like help educate me about all the changes that are happening or to like remove a lot of the pain without me knowing it? Like, how do you find that balance of, hey guys, there's this huge shock and you're going to have to deal with this versus we're going to handle it for you?
Yeah, so it was definitely both. And so that's where us from like a content perspective, and I'll use content broadly, whether that's written, email, video, webinars, it's really like how can our fulfilled event, like how can we bring as much education in the space? Our partner ecosystem, for example, which is, hey, we're not always the experts on X, Y, or Z, but like our partners are. And so let's bring them to the table, or you can enter an engagement with them to like we've got some great partners on like the tariff side that if you want to get into like the extreme nitty gritty and have them handle everything for you on that behalf, including like the accounting side, like we have partners for that. And so there's that element. And then on the operational side is like, well, where what is our role? And so for example, like by having a multi-node network in the US, having facilities around the world, again, those are ways to reduce the impact of the tariff changes. The way that we work with so many of the carriers in the US and around the world, that way when there are surprise surcharges and increases elsewhere, or even it was, what was it? I think it was kind of Q1 and Q2 of last year. There were a lot of things happening between USPS and UPS and FedEx and the NSAs that they had between each other. And so there were some like in DHL, like some crazy price increases in shipping labels. But because we work with so many different carriers, outside of like what's called general rate increase or GRI, which happens at the beginning of every year, like there was actually a huge change that happened in Q2 of last year where some brands were seeing like 20 to 40% increases in their shipping costs. And again, fortunately, our customers saw no change because we work with so many different carriers, and so that's where it's also our job to get ahead of these things, to build in that reliable infrastructure that doesn't have these massive fluctuations. Like we do think about it a lot, is like how can we shield our customers from so many of these macro changes that are completely out of their control.
You guys have the scale and the flexibility to say like, all right, we're going to swap in this carrier for that carrier, get you a similar level of service for a more consistent price in a way that
Yeah.
like,
Exactly. And again, it's not always price. And sometimes like we will make less money by selecting a different carrier because their performance changes. And so we actually had a partner, a carrier partner of ours during peak season who's typically rather reliable. They just got massively overwhelmed and we had to shut them off for a few weeks in December. We turned them back on once we started retesting them and make sure the performance was strong. But yeah, sometimes these carriers can get a bit overwhelmed, and so you have to be able to move pretty quickly with that.
after the podcast, I want you to spill the tea. I want to know who's screwing up, talk about them behind their backs. Yeah, I mean, it is anything to do with this ecosystem is extraordinarily difficult. So I have all the empathy in the world for the people, or for the companies who eventually do get overwhelmed or something happens. You said something before that I just wanted to double click on because I actually think was a really good insight. You mentioned kind of in passing, like educating the space when Shopify fulfillment came in. This is something that I've seen. This is something that we see with Orita right now. It's like we talk about AI segmentation. It's so much easier to talk to somebody who has tried RFM or all these other segmentation tools. And the same way when we started passport shipping, it was really, really helpful for DHL to exist. And for me to tell somebody international shipping matters was much harder if they've never done it before versus they're like, oh yeah, there's a very big market out there. Let's go. And I think people forget that like you do need to be patient and like let people get educated, let Shopify go serve and educate the market. And I think you guys have obviously built a product that is much, much better. And so it's like people get to graduate to it. I think the framing you gave of we don't need to be your first, we want to be your last fulfillment center, like truly resonates. So I love that approach and I love the mentality. Casey, maybe for the last thread, I want to talk about, I'm sorry, but artificial intelligence, if you've heard
Well,
of
let's get to AI. Actually, before, because I was going
Okay.
to see where you want to take it. I think that's a good point too, which is like, I think sometimes people will just want to go into these kind of blue ocean, like empty spaces, and there's the pros and cons.
Mm.
I'm sure you have a long list of the
Not-
cons as you're trying to like educate people and like this is why we
Yeah.
matter. Because it is true. Like again, when there was the at Shopify Unite and they made that announcement. Granted, like people a good chunk knew like why fulfillment was important, but it was actually pretty interesting. It was like even after the announcement, at the lunch session afterwards, like we had so many partners coming up to us and it was like they had this like renewed interest. They're like, oh, that thing you've been talking about forever that obviously you think is important because that's like your business. Shopify, that was like their keynote mic drop. And so obviously it must be important. And so this project I worked on forever ago, it was under Sign Now, which was one of the earlier e-signature companies. We launched a product called Notary Now. And the founders, hats off to them, they actually went through, I think it was through the state of Virginia and got approval for electronic notaries. Granted, this was like in 2011-ish or 12.
Mm.
And so you'd use a video screen like we're using today, and there'd be an approved notary over in Virginia, and you'd have to do whatever, upload your ID and verify it looks like it, and you could notarize online, which this should just be a thing. And nobody was doing it. Nobody. We were the first in the space. Again, like the founders are the ones that got it passed through legislation. And so the way we had to go to market and just even like we had to do some very interesting things just even to attract consumers, because even if they're like, hey, you can spend $100 million a month on AdWords. I'd be like, cool, I spent $7 because nobody's searching for this. And so, yeah, there are pros and cons to it being crowded versus a blue ocean.
We're very much in the like, hey guys, math matters. And people are like, I don't know if it matters. I'm like, no, math works. Like, it's really great. But yeah, blue ocean is, it giveth and it taketh away.
Yes.
I do like getting stuff notarized, not in person. So thank you for your service. It's very helpful. All right, I want to talk a little bit about AI and kind of on two different threads. I'm definitely curious how it's changing your work and like the team's work and what you're building. Candidly, more interested in how like for you guys aren't a bits company, you're like a bits and an atoms company, obviously.
Mhm.
How, if at all, is it changing like what products you're building, what the end customer experience is, your ability? Maybe it's like, hey, you can sort through like a bunch of carriers more efficiently. Like, where are the places where like actually all the new technology and like all the new opportunity that exists is truly kind of like, where does the rubber meet the road on a fulfillment side or on a logistics side?
Yeah. So naturally, like a lot of companies like yours and others, just the ability to like build, test, iterate, like accelerates massively. But I think it's really supercharging a lot of the things that we have built in recent years.
Mm.
So like our inventory placement program. And so you can ship everything to one facility and we look at your demand patterns at this individual SKU level to see how we should distribute those goods on your behalf. Like it's taken that to the next level, just really being able to use that intelligence so quickly and thoroughly to understand like what's happening and also look not just at your business, but like, okay, you're in the pet supplement space, analyzing like the anonymized data across all of our customers that are there and just use that as like as another input to identify like how should you distribute your goods.
And so the idea being like, and I remember talking about this with a friend's brand that started a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, where you guys picked it up, but it's like, look, we'll import to this port and then trust ShipBob to distribute because you'll have more orders on the coast or central or whatever, right? And like actually put the product. I didn't realize you would do it at the SKU level data as well. And the idea of like getting in the anonymized data of like, probably you're going to have more purchases here based on what your product is. That's super cool. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the good or maybe lazy example often is like take apparel. And so, we work with some pretty cool large apparel brands and like if they sell, hoodies and sweatshirts, maybe those work pretty well across the US, like semi evenly distributed, but like all of a sudden it comes to swimsuits. Well, during the winter, like guess what? Here in SoCal, we're still buying swimsuits, but the rest of the country, not so much. And so Yeah, you got to look at it at the SKU level. And so that's one. Another is that we think about a lot is, and so when you're, for the most part, when you're paying for fulfillment and the way we try to simplify it, there's basically essentially like a total fulfillment cost because we're trying to like simplify like what your P&L looks like in regards to fulfillment. And so there's on the y-axis, it's weights or dimensional weights, or I'll just call it billable weights. And then on the x-axis, it's the zones. And the zones are essentially like how far it ships. And so again, that's where inventory placement is extremely helpful because you want to like reduce the zones, which will help you save money and also reduce the shipping time. But then also on the billable weight side, a lot of that often comes down to like the packaging that you're using. So that's something that we've had for a long time that I think really got supercharged recently, which is what is the ideal box size or packaging type based off of your SKU mix? And so, we'll uh, Cubiscan new SKUs as they enter our system, which will dictate like how we stow those and also how we pack those. But then as we're all, trying to like have the machines learn all the time, which is like, what is the ideal packaging material and the packaging size? That's so you can really start to reduce, the the dimensions of the package and can hopefully reduce the billable weight to then, ship it out even less expensively on that front.
That's super cool. I am curious, are you finding different partners who are like maybe your top tier partners, and then you have like some of the more nascent ones, and they're actually now building more quickly, or like there's like I don't know the right way to ask this. Is your team finding a different suite of partners who are more impactful today for your customers because they're just like more innovative or like taking advantage and moving more quickly?
I don't have a good answer there. I'd say we're able to be a better partner on that front because we can just build faster or evolve, like, let's just say the integration suite at a faster clip. But in regards to like which partners are maybe doing that reciprocally, I don't really have a good answer right now.
Got it. It's interesting though, even just like the ability to open up the marketplace even more. My term, not yours, but like bring on more partners because of kind of more efficient internal tooling is very cool.
Yeah.
Casey, I think you might have frozen. No, you're here. Hi, buddy. You look
Yeah.
great.
There we go.
All right, last thread. And thank you. This has been really interesting. I love geeking out about this stuff, and I appreciate you taking the time. Was your team's workflow changing? How is your workflow changing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? What are you more looking forward to coming up as well?
I think what actually gets me most excited is now we can essentially build anything. And so like if there are prototypes we want to build, if is tooling I want to build, both internally facing or externally facing, the wish list of things that I would have liked to have been able to build, but I don't know how to, and I'm not a designer, like those things are more or less completely like not more or less eliminated. And so it's really like, wherever you want to take it from a creativity standpoint. And so with tools like Replit or Claude or and some of these others, and like tap into, again, you got to make sure security requirements and all that are up to snuff, but like tap into your database and whatever your core MarTech stack is, whether that's HubSpot or Salesforce and Google Analytics and AdWords and all these different tools, and how you can use that again to run marketing better, to like understand everything from an entire go-to-market perspective with sales better, and just even again build things that are valuable to your customers by utilizing a lot of the data that you already have. And so it can help from maybe a customer acquisition standpoint, it can help from an education standpoint. They can use it after they close as well. It's pretty cool. The I think where you have to be careful is we still need to sleep. And so I'm like, my gosh, there's like, I can just stay up forever and build whatever I want. It's like, we all have the graveyard of these amazing, in quotes, amazing ideas that are sitting in our like GoDaddy accounts with like different domains. And it's like, oh, actually, you know what? I can actually now do all that by myself. And so
I have no idea what you're talking about with a lot of these.
yeah, none at all. So yeah, that's pretty exciting.
Most of my budget during my modified days was buying other domains. So this is pretty great. Just kind of reflecting on what you were saying earlier, and even how you talked about it now, is the framing that I know from you is always like, it is for the customer. It's not for me. So it's like, can we go prototype something that makes a customer journey better, partner's journey better? And I think like something that people tend to miss is like building for the sake of building doesn't make sense. It's like, are you actually solving a core need? So I very much appreciate that about you as a builder, but also, again, couldn't be further outside of ShipBob, but everything I've seen from you guys over the years is you're like always chipping away and always trying to build out. kind of good products and a great experience for brands. Casey, this is awesome. I want to give you just another minute or two if there's anything else you wanted to share or you want to double click on, like any advice for brand owners. You don't need to jump at this opportunity. And then the second thing is just where can folks find you? Where can folks find ShipBob?
Yeah, ShipBob.com. My email is carmstrong@shipbob.com. Hit me up if you have questions. Again, we global fulfillment solution, omni-channel fulfillment. We've got 60 plus facilities around the world. We work with some amazing brands out there, and it's just been awesome to see a lot of their growth. I think what gets me most excited too is when you start seeing them go from a mil to 5 mil to 10 mil to 100 mil in GMV to whatever, 500 million plus in GMV across all these channels. And then their operations team is still like 3 or 4 people. And it's like really leveraging technology. And I think, and that's where like the partner infrastructure is so important. And I think, hopefully from an AI side is these businesses can still find all this leverage from like a human capital and time perspective to leverage the right technologies to build these big businesses pretty efficiently is pretty exciting. So as always, thanks for having me. Hopefully if we do it again, it'll be in person, but good to see you as always, Aaron.
Yeah, I no longer go to the logistics conferences. I don't see you at all the marketing conferences. We're like ships passing in the night.
We'll come up with an excuse.
We'll find some conference in Australia and we'll just go there together.
There we go.
All right, Casey, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Aaron Schwartz, co-founder and co-CEO of Orita.ai. We build AI customer segmentation for some of Klaviyo's biggest brands like Oriana, Spanx, Caraway, Third Love, True Classic, Rem Beauty, and on and on. Brands come to us to help find untapped revenue, improve their click rate, drive away mean bots, and a bunch more. You can learn more or get a free customer engagement audit at Orita.ai.